As a continued part of the self-publishing comparison series, we're going to be discussing ACX versus Findaway Voices. Who is the best audiobook platform to use? You're going to be surprised. The answer isn't as clear as you would expect, so make sure that you stay tuned. What's happening, folks? I'm just tickled to death. You took a little bit of time out your day to spend a little bit of time with me to talk about my favorite thing, self-publishing books. And we are continuing this whole self-publishing comparison series, and believe it or not, we're going to continue to go through into next week and possibly beyond. Well, we're going to see. I don't want to overdo it. Today's podcast is brought to you in part by my favorite tool, Publisher Rocket. Sell more books and ebooks on Amazon. Publisher Rocket will help you get your book in front of more Amazon shoppers so you can spend less time marketing and more time writing, which is my favorite part. I mean, marketing's fantastic and such, but who wants to be spending all the time doing that? Visit dalelinks.com/rocket to give it a shot today. All purchases come with a 30-day money-back guarantee. I mean, if you're not happy, you can always return it. Zero regrets, honestly. And I'm not going to give you any kind of pressure. Again, go to dalelinks.com/rocket to find out for yourself why I swear by this self-publishing tool. All right, so why ACX versus Findaway Voices? If you happen to be new to this industry, then you probably don't know that these are both audiobook distribution companies. Both stand at the forefront of audiobook publishing and distribution. I mean, there are a few exceptions, and we're certainly going to talk about a couple of them next week in the podcast. But these are both with extraordinary reach, whether you're wide with Findaway Voices or even when you're just doing an exclusive deal with, say, ACX. You're still reaching an active customer base through some of the world's leading online marketplaces in places like Amazon. Now, both are owned by two large companies. ACX is actually an Amazon-owned company, and of course, this year, Spotify acquired Findaway, the parent company of Findaway Voices. Now, there hasn't been any significant changes, although I will talk about a change that happened actually within the last week of this podcast. We'll get into that, but all that to say this, that Spotify picked up Findaway Voices, and it looks like they're going to be staying on course. Now, let's go ahead and get to the comparisons. Let's start it out with production. How do we produce this? Both of them have pretty much similar options. It starts out with the DIY options, so where you just come with your own production. So if you're able to record your own audiobooks, be it in person, or you hire someone off platform, or you do it at a local studio, either way, you could do it yourself on either one of those. Now, ACX has very specific specs. I know that's specification, so I just said it twice, so who cares? But they are, they're sticklers on it. If you don't abide by it, they will spit back your audio file and say, hey, we're not distributing this trash. And they don't say that exactly, but it usually feels that way. They actually have a tool called the Audio Lab, the ACX Audio Lab. It's the same system that's used when you upload. It's just built into the publishing process. Now, Audio Lab essentially goes through, figures out if your file passes their specifications. And if it does, then great, fantastic. You can hopefully expect distribution. More of that in a second here. Now, Findaway Voices have essentially the same specs, but they're a lot more relaxed than ACX. So, you don't have to have it perfect, but near perfect certainly works for Findaway Voices. Sadly, if you plan to distribute to ACX's avenues through Findaway Voices, you still have to meet the strict standards of ACX or you miss out on distribution. I even asked them at one point or another, for whatever reason, I had an audiobook and they kept saying, and they kept pushing it back and saying, no, there's a discrepancy at the beginning of this file. Don't hear it at all. Findaway Voice is totally fine. This is, wait, we don't hear it. But I said, if I distribute to ACX through you guys, will they accept it? And they're like, well, if it bounced going directly to them, it'll probably bounce with us as well. The best practice I would recommend is format your audio files and cross-check them with the ACX Audio Lab, whether you use ACX or Findaway Voices. And you can do that over at acx.com/audiolab or just Google that up. Now, rights holders, beware. Okay, this is letting you know if you happen to be distributing through each of these platforms. Both of the platforms do have human vetting, meaning that even though you're going to go through an automated process, making sure your files are according to specs, there are still humans that go in and listen to that, so there's a good chance it could get bounced back. ACX, of course, is a little unforgiving. You might go through Audio Lab and feel like you've got it nailed, but it could still bounce back. Findaway Voices, though, they're much more lenient. I've seen that they aren't really so bad about, cracking down on you. All right, the next model to kind of talk about when it comes to production is called royalty share. Now, this means that you're essentially parting ways with a percentage of your earnings for a given audiobook in exchange for a narrator to do the book for you. Now, ACX has what's called a 50-50 royalty split. Now, it's a 7-year agreement to where the narrator, again, gets 50% of all sales. Now, you don't pay them a dime up front or at the end. Can you break out of a 50-50 royalty split? Yes, but it gets kind of messy because you're going to probably have to go buy out the rights from the narrator, and then ACX has to delist it, and then you can relist it so that way there is no audiobook split. So be very selective. And also, if you find that you have a breakthrough hit with an audiobook and you're expecting to pay this person their normal finished per hour rate, and I'll talk more about that in a bit, you got another thing coming because they know they stand to lose something by breaking a contract they would otherwise be getting a ton more money. Any rate, Findaway Voices, though, they have their royalty share system to where it's a 60-20-20 split. Now, normally, and I'm going to talk about the 80-20 split with Findaway Voices, but when you're using the Voices share program, they essentially just take 20% of your 80%. That's it. It's pretty nice. I think it's a 10-year agreement, so it's not the greatest, but the cool thing is when you want to go and buy out those rights, you essentially can be able to do that. You got to read the fine print again, and I believe it ends up being 150% a payout, kind of like what they do with the Voices Share Plus program, and I'll talk about here in a second. Per finished hour. All right, let's talk about this. It's based on the total length of the book. So when you hear a narrator say, I charge $500 per finished hour, you're probably going, whoa, I'm not paying you $500 per hour. No, it's based on the total length of the book because you got to keep in mind that a 30,000 word manuscript is going to take hours of preparation, hours of editing, hours of understanding the material. So just going through an hourly rate doesn't quite work for voiceover talent. Great creators typically cost anywhere from about $250 or more per finished hour. As an example, a novel that's, say, 80,000 words, if it was read by a narrator that goes at about 9,800 words per hour, that's going to be about 8 hours and 10 minutes. Now, the voiceover talent, let's say they're $250 per finished hour. The total investment for that 8 hour and 10 minute audiobook is going to be $2,040. Now, that's a substantial amount of money. I know a lot of you folks are out there going, oh my gosh, but listen, getting audiobooks is not cheap, but it is an investment in your long-term growth because I am telling you this, that audiobook publishing is on the rise. More people are consuming audiobooks than ever before. So staking your claim now is a good idea. Now, what about cheaper narrators? Now, I've found some for as low as $50 per finished hour, but my experience in actually producing my own audiobook in a professional studio, I started to understand why people don't want to charge $50 per finished hour. Because when I did the math of how much it cost for me to actually have an engineer go through and edit and master that, as well as the time to produce it, it was about $125 per finished hour for me as a minimum, all right? That's to pay the bills, to make sure I'm not going broke. So if someone were hiring me, I'd have to charge at least $125 or if not $130 so I can at least get $5 extra. But that kind of tells you that expenses are not something that you want to skimp on. Find a good narrator, and if you do find one, don't be afraid to pay them a little bit more so you keep them on your payroll for any future audiobooks you have to do. And you got to always remember, you have to account for file corrections, additional changes needed before you launch too. It never comes out perfect. So sometimes you've got to spend just a little bit more money, as I kind of did. Both officially have a marketplace now. We've talked about all these different production, areas and such. Findaway Voices officially launched their marketplace. Now, they used to actually have a matchmaker system, but it's no longer available, or not just the only option. You're able to get with the narrator without having an intermediary, meaning that you can find audiobook narrators that you would like to work with in a way that, you feel is best for your business. ACX works the same way. You can actively search for voiceover candidates, and you can accept auditions for an audiobook that you're trying to produce. Last but not least is the hybrid royalty share and per finished hour. So essentially what it does is this royalty share plus you pay them a substantially lower per finished hour rate. So let's just say, for instance, that I find someone who's $500 per finished hour. Eek, I can't do that, but I can pay you $250 per finished hour. They're probably going to be willing to work with you if they're not normally used to doing any kind of royalty splits. Now, both are relatively the same. ACX's Royalty Share Plus program is 50-50 plus the lower per finished hour. Now, remember, that per finished hour typically is going to production, to paying for the mastering, the editing, the studio time, getting experts to come in, make sure this thing is nice and tight. Some narrators do hire out for editing and mastering audio tracks, and some people just need to be compensated for their time. Now, with Findaway Voices Share, it's pretty much the same, but a better royalty payout with an upfront fee when you can buy about half upfront. So in other words, you're going to pay for 50% of the production. Now, later on, if you want to get out of that agreement, you just put 100% down. That means you're going to end up paying right about 150% for that audiobook, whereas if you were to do the per finished hour right away, it would probably be 100%. All that to say this, it's a way that you don't have to take as much of a risk in doing a per finished hour deal. And if you find it starts to pay off, you can just buy them out. ACX does not have that option. And there's even some narrators out there that do not want to do the whole royalty share plus voices system. So just keep that in mind. Now, let's talk about the royalty structure. ACX has 40% royalty for exclusive. This means that you're going to get 40% of every sale of your audiobook on the various platforms. If you want out of it, most recently they changed that to where you can get out of distribution as long as it's been 90 days on sale through their platform. Now, here's a little bit of a caveat. I learned this from a friend of mine, Ahilan, and Ahilan had told me, hey, I just found Findaway Voices wasn't working out for me, so I decided I want to go back to exclusive to ACX. Lo and behold, in the fine print, that if you actually get out of exclusivity and go into non-exclusive, there's no going back. But thankfully, he was successful in doing that, but he kind of was able to, talk his way into that. I'm not going to be able to guarantee you will be able to do that. Will I plan on doing it? No. Usually when I go to Findaway Voices, there's a good reason, and I'll share why I stick with Findaway Voices. Now, with ACX, you get a 25% royalty if you're non-exclusive, meaning that you can publish to ACX in any other platforms, whether that's Findaway Voices, Audiobooks Unleashed, Authors Republic, so on and so forth, Publish Drive. So non-exclusive does come at a 15% loss in your royalty, but you get more reach. You're able to get out to more platforms. Now, there's something you have to account for is platform-specific royalties. Now, Findaway Voices is what's called an aggregate publisher, meaning they function as a middleman. They represent you in distributing your title out to various avenues. So this means that they're going to take a percentage of your net profits. So does ACX, though, to a certain extent. So the Amazon and Audible platform, it's either 40% or 25% by way of ACX, but they also have distribution to Apple through ACX. And that distribution gets 25% of each sale. Now, you're probably confused. You're going, wait, hang on a second. So if I sell something through Apple, I get 25% of that sale coming back to ACX. And then ACX takes their 60% or 75% cut. Yeah. But here's the cool thing. It's 45% for Apple by way of Findaway Voices. Why is that? Well, Apple cites Findaway Voices as a preferred partner. And when I pressed them about their thoughts surrounding ACX, it was in a webinar of theirs that they were doing. They pretty much said, yeah, ACX is not a preferred partner. They left it at that. It was just a cold answer. And I was just like, oh, snap. So at any rate, Findaway Voices, it's a little bit more complex. As I kind of mentioned, you do get 80% royalty of all net profits that come in. And each one of those regions are going to change based on whatever you're selling or distributing your book to. Let's move over to pricing. ACX is the most hogwash I've seen of any self-publishing platform when it comes to pricing. They don't let you price your book. No. In fact, the only way you could price your book is if you purposely time it to a specific length. Yeah. They will charge the amount they feel is necessary based on the length of your audiobook, and you have no say in it. That right there stinks. Now, with Findaway Voices, guess what? You said it. Yeah, you said it. And not only that, but for library distribution, they even allow you to increase the amount that you sell it for to libraries, because obviously they're going to be checking it out and it's going to be borrowed numerous times. That means that's less customers that are going to be buying your book. So all that to say that Findaway Voices is nice. You can change your pricing. Now let's talk about the distribution, ACX. They have 3 avenues, well, technically 2, because they have Amazon, Audible, but those are both Amazon-owned companies, and then Apple. Now keep in mind, though, that if you want to use ACX, you must be in the regions of US, UK, Ireland, and Canada. It's been that way for a few years now. I imagine it'll start to grow and expand beyond that. But for now, if you're not in those regions, don't try to weasel your way in. Don't try to spoof your way onto the platform. Accounts were frozen back in 2019 up till now of those people that are outside of those regions and are caught. All right, ACX is smart to that. They're not just run by a bunch of robots and computers. There's humans there, and they will see and detect when there is some fraudulent activity. If you're not in those 4 regions, don't bother with it, because you can go over to Findaway Voices, because they accept almost all regions throughout the world. And they get the same distribution, by the way, as ACX, because here's the deal. Findaway Voices has 44 avenues right now. What? Yeah, let me say it again. 44 avenues. That's crazy. This is including ACX's reach plus other online retailers, subscription-based programs, and library-based programs. Nuts. Let's talk about payout, because ACX has a $10 minimum threshold, and they will pay you out the last week of the month following the end of the billing period. And I believe it works at about 30 days after the close of the month is how it usually is. They will do it by direct deposit or check. No other options. So, Findaway Voices, though, they've got some minimum thresholds, and it varies per delivery model. And as they said, we typically see US-based users gravitate towards direct deposit, ACH, for the most flexible and fee-free process, but ultimately the choice is yours. And I believe it's 30 days after the close of the month. You can do it by direct deposit, PayPal, check, and wire transfer. So they are so flexible. All right, I'm going to give you my final thoughts here in just a second. I want, of course, give a quick reminder here that today's broadcast is brought to you in part by Publisher Rocket. Sell more books and ebooks on Amazon. Visit dalelinks.com/rocket for more details and why I gush so much about this specific tool. Here are my final thoughts. ACX versus Findaway Voices. You might be thinking, I'm going to pick and choose one. But it was kind of a debate that I had with some of the folks when we were doing this podcast recording here live. Star Wars versus Star Trek. Why can't we love both? Why can't we enjoy both of them? Not one avenue is better than the other, and they both serve a great purpose. Sure, some of them come with their pros and some come with cons. If I were pressed, I personally feel Findaway Voices is best for my needs. My needs is I want to reach more readers. If I have to sacrifice a little bit of money through the non-exclusive avenue of ACX agreement, so be it. I'm okay with that. I'll lose 15% if it means I'll be able to get into libraries or subscription-based services. My mission is to reach more readers, not limit them to any one platform or beholden to places like Audible or Amazon. But that's up to you. That's personal taste. Next week, we are going to be discussing Authors Republic versus Audiobooks Unleashed. These are 2 alternatives to the ones that we just discussed now. So next week's going to be a very exciting episode. To get advanced access to all podcasts, visit dalelinks.com/YouTube podcast 1 week before the audio podcast content publishes. Till later, I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for tuning into this comparison series. It's clear that you guys are enjoying this.